Most fintech brands are trying to look younger and more casual. Public spent the last couple of years deliberately going the other way, specifically more mature. Zach Dioneda is VP of Brand Marketing at Public, and he was on the show actually about a year ago, right as this rebrand was rolling out. So I wanted to have him back and see how it played out. Well, as we'll see, they stopped competing with the other neo-brokers and started positioning Public as a serious investing platform. Basically a more modern Schwab or Fidelity. And Zach is a perfect person to walk us through it. Before Public, he ran brand at Fiverr through its IPO, and he came up there on the agency side, working with accounts like State Farm. He was also named Breakout Brand Leader back in 2023 by Ad Age. Now, if you're not aware of Public, it's a multi-asset investing platform with stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and retirement accounts all in one place, plus an AI research layer called Generated Assets. They've raised over $400 billion from investors, including Axel and Tiger Global. In this episode, we get into why Public repositioned against Schwab and Fidelity instead of the other neo-brokers, how they build trust across a longer buyer cycle, from Soho billboards to podcast ads, why they're careful with the incentives and growth hacks that can cheapen a brand, and how they made a TV ad almost entirely with AI. But there's still one thing they'll never use AI for. This was a really fun episode, so let's get into it. Perfect. Well, I'd like to start off, Zach, by, it's so great to see you again. It's been like almost a year, actually, since we last chatted, and Public's been very busy. You've done a lot. So since we last caught up, you did a rebrand, new positioning, new experience. And I think it's a very interesting way that you're going because it's quite different to the rest of maybe the companies in that space. So could you walk us through a little bit through the thinking behind the rebrand and kind of what is the goal? And why have you gone through that?
Absolutely. First, it's a pleasure to be on and to chat again. And I think last time we talked, we were actually kind of just rolling the early innings of rolling out this rebrand, which was a little bit of a moving target for us, right? Like, I think in kind of Public fashion, we move at a very high velocity, right? Move very quick. And for us, it was more important to move quickly and get this brand evolution into market than, say, take a more traditional approach where we take 6 to 9 months, work on a rebrand behind the scenes, unveil it all at once. And for us, we really wanted to start getting it out there and start making some step changes. And so for us, what we're trying to do is position Public as the platform for people who take investing seriously. Like, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. And so what really we focused on is creating or evolving our brand to better align with the world-class investing platform that we've been building, right? That's been happening over time. The really interesting thing for us is that we kind of have to thread the needle between two kind of ends. And this is the balance that we're always trying to strike, being a more modern day investing platform, right? On one hand, you have like the trust, sophistication, premium, seriousness of being a player in the financial technology space, right? A brokerage. But on the other hand, how do we marry that with innovation, technology, and design, right? And so when you look at our kind of continuum of the other players in the space, us included, and the competitors, you kind of have the other set of neo-brokers, and by definition, we might be kind of included in that, right? And everyone has pros and cons and is further along or not as far along in their journey, but generally a little bit more casual for one reason or another. On the other side, you have our legacy players, right, that have great trust, credibility. They've been around for a really long time, but they lack the design and the digital first nature of these platforms. And so we're really trying to thread that needle between the two of those. And one of the things that I think about is trying to reframe our consideration set or competitive or consideration set from just being against those other neo-brokers to actually moving it way up the other side and being an alternative to the Schwabs and Fidelities of the world. One of the things that we've seen that is often a really good shorthand, and we've seen this in the response to this kind of brand evolution and where the product has gone over time, is that we see people talking about Public as a more modern Schwab or Fidelity. And I think I even said this last time, but it's really kind of come true in a way, is that we have that opportunity and people are starting to see that, and we'll continue to push down that road. And so again, we had this world-class investing platform from a product standpoint, and we needed the brand to match that and also help lead the charge.
Yeah, that's the thing that I find so interesting is that in order to move kind of upmarket a little bit, right? Marketing that's a big job for marketing to do, brand and marketing to do, like product obviously, but without marketing doing that, you can't move to a different, in a way, kind of messaging and ideal customer and all that. So I guess like at what point do you feel like you realized maybe the old brand wouldn't take you there? Like at what point did you realize that, or maybe some of the specifics that you decided to change, like for example the logo and all that, and kind of some of the main brand assets haven't changed, it's more messaging and all that. So yeah, at what point did you realize that what you had before wouldn't take you there, and what are some of the things that you changed?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of helpful to look back to the start, right? And like if you rewind all the way back, Public first made our mark as the social investing app. When we first started, we had stocks and we had this social component. And that helped us really kind of carve out that first niche. But as the landscape evolved, our business evolved, and right, like we just talked about building a world-class investing platform, especially as the landscape was changing. And so that was the first sort of piece, is as we saw the landscape change, our business goals started to shift a little bit. And that's where we really started to go all in on not just building a social platform for investing, but building a more modern world-class investing platform. That's when we realized that we needed a brand to go with that. Now, when was that shift, right? Like what it happened is that like, in order to grow that business, we had to do the brand thing at the same time. But it's been truly, this is a little bit of a long-winded answer, but this brand evolution was really years in the making, right? All the way back to 2022, when we really kind of started making that shift from a product and business standpoint. We started adding on these additional product offerings, right? Going from just stocks to, over the course of years, stocks, bonds, options, treasuries, high yield, crypto, more recently, things like direct indexing, the generated assets, AI-based product, and all of our other AI tools helped build this world-class investing platform. And so we started this shift over time from 2022, 23, 24. And really at the end of 24 is when we looked around and said, okay, wow, this product, the platform is really there. It's matching with where we want to go as the brand. And that was sort of the tipping point, right? Like we had gotten to product parity with where we needed to get to be able to bring people into the fold without them saying, oh, I wish they had that, right? Like, or I can't join public because they don't have crypto, or they can't join public because they don't have access to bonds, right? Like we got over that hump and had all of those elements at our disposal. And so end of 2024 was really that moment where we're like, okay, it's time to put the investment, the time and effort into making this shift. And we unveiled it in early 2025. Now, what I talked about briefly is, right, in a true public fashion, we move very quickly here. And so for us, it was, how do we get this out into the world as quickly as possible to make as big of an impact as possible? And to be honest, like we did that, but we broke a few things in the process, right? Like in early part of 2025, we had to do a lot of building the plane as we're flying it. And to some extent, that's okay. And we were able to kind of put the right guardrails around doing so, that we were able to make the impact by getting it live, and then really come in and kind of tighten up things and make a bunch of decisions that help make things roll a lot quicker and more smoothly in the future. Again, at the core, like we're still delivering on our mission with this brand evolution, right? And now this brand matches up with the product that we are building, and we're continuing to build for the future. And now the brand matches the product, but can also help lead where we want the product going as well.
I think what I like is that you have decided to go after more serious investors. And I think a lot of maybe other brands would say, okay, we need to go for older investors because they're the ones who are usually the ones that go after Fidelity or Vanguard or whatever. But you actually, in your messaging, is quite clear. It's for Gen Z who want to be serious, right? Am I right in saying that? Like you're going after, or is it?
I wouldn't necessarily say that we are going after just Gen Z. Like, look, we will take everybody, of course. We actually skew a little bit older. Now, I think if you go back to that continuum I talked about, right? Like we're going to skew younger than the legacy players, but we're actually skewing a little bit older than a lot of those other neo brokers. And what we're finding is things like retention of our users, right? Once the users are coming on board, the mindset of our core user base is more of that of a long-term investor, right? There's a lot of different cohorts of people, and different individuals can kind of go between different mindsets and product sets. Even within that, though, there's a lot of flexibility in there. But generally, we see folks that are coming to public that have more of a long-term mindset. And so that kind of skews us a little bit older. And now, especially with some of the products that we've offered and the order, right? Like kind of reinventing bonds for a more digital modern age, the core user group there is not Gen Z. There's going to be some folks in that Gen Z group that discover them and are like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. I can add this to my portfolio. But generally, we're going to skew a little bit older than just Gen Z. And so I'd say our core user base, our core audience is still kind of that millennial audience. Again, it's going to be a little bit older than some of those other neo-broker competitors, but it's going to be younger than the more legacy players. And that's where we're really starting to find our sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, as time goes on, those Gen Z are become older and have more money. And
we graduate people along the spectrum,
exactly.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you're investing with an earlier audience on purpose so that then in 10 years when they have more money, of course, they're going to already stick with public, right?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we have talked a lot about, especially earlier stages of this sort of brand evolution, was maintaining or promoting a aspirational approach, right? Like if we position public as a brand only for beginners, we're not going to get people that are already further along. Now, if we can turn that dial a little bit and position and show people examples, experiences in our brand and product language that are a little bit more further along or are more aspirational, we'll get those people that want to reach up, that want to graduate there, and that see themselves there in the future, as well as the people that are already there. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility, actually. Now, on the other side, by not being directly a Gen Z brand, there are times where we might be a little bit more conservative than some of our competitors. And so that's always a balance that we're trying to strike. But as you said, as time goes on, people continue to grow. There's new people every day that turn 18, right? And there is no demographic rule on who we want to acquire or who we will bring into the fold. It's just where we've sort of settled in, again, along that kind of competitive set is where we're kind of netting out.
Yeah. But this is what I mean, like maybe a few years ago, you were focused on the beginner kind of audience, and now it's definitely more mature and more advanced. And could you share some specifics of how, from a marketing perspective, that has changed? So for example, I saw an ad of yours in a Morning Brew video. I'm a big fan. So maybe some examples of like where now you place your ads, or where you now obviously the messaging has changed. That's a great example. The messaging within the ads have changed. Like what are some ways that you've adjusted a little bit that marketing or those messages?
Absolutely. So I think there's a lot of different avenues we can go down here because things have evolved over the past couple of years. But I think one thing that's interesting is for a growth stage company, right? Like we will always do some level of paid acquisition marketing, right? And I lead up the brand team and creative team, and I work very closely with the acquisition team here. And we believe that we can do really great acquisition driving creative that still leads the brand, and we can do brand that still acquires customers. So generally that all works really, really well. But over time, if that dial is turning a little bit, we might lose a little bit of that direct response or a little bit of the channel specific context of that creative in favor of a little bit more brand halo effect over time. And then things like our TV advertising. Now we're going to start to dial up the production quality a little bit. Maybe the quantity comes down a little bit and we're spending a little bit more time on each ad. AI is coming into the picture this year and the end of last year and really kind of throwing a bunch of curveballs in there. But last year we launched a new video or TV campaign with real public users. It was testimonial driven in nature, which is a very direct response marketing tactic. But what we really worked on is shooting that in the most beautiful, aesthetic way that still brings all of this brand evolution to life. And I feel that it worked really well. And when we're working with our teams, we see how it works from an acquisition standpoint, but it also still drives brand at the same time. And then really just thinking about the context in which ads appear, right? I think we talked about this last time, but one of the things that we think about when we buy out-of-home advertising, for instance, is, again, the context in which they appear. So if we're buying a billboard, we really try to limit those to those A-level neighborhood and locations. We'd rather focus on the quality over quantity there. Now, again, I'm a marketing guy, so of course we think about reach and frequency, and we're going to add in some taxi tops to mix in with those. But if we're buying a big billboard, we'd prefer it to be in Soho, where there's people that are coming in from different walks of life, but that might be a little bit more influential in their day-to-day life, right? Because that's the area where they're hanging out, and it's this different sort of buzz and electricity happening in those neighborhoods. So those are a few things that we think about, and I can go down any one of those if you want to talk more.
Well, I think it interlinks nicely with what I was going to talk about now, which is more like trust, because this is kind of what we want to talk about, right? Building trust in B2C. And the thing is that what you're doing here as you're becoming a serious targeting or working with more serious investors, trust becomes even more important because serious people want to feel like the platform that they're using is trustworthy, right? And I think what you're saying is quality over quantity. It also helps with trust, right? If I see an ad and the production quality is super high, I'm thinking if they're willing to put so much energy, money, resources into an ad, chances are they are going to do that with the product as well, right? So it's like high quality marketing is a proxy for a high quality product. So are there any things you've had to change there as well from a marketing perspective, or anything that you've started doing more that also helps with that trust building? Or for example, any growth tactics that you have had to say, no, we can't do that because now we have a different messaging and we're focused on more serious investors, like anything there that's happening?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that we can talk about. Back to out of home for a quick second, which again, it's one of the smallest pieces of our media mix, but I think it's interesting when you talk about it being a proxy because, again, that context. And so not just being in Soho, but one of the reasons why we want to be in places like that is instead of our billboards showing up in places where you're used to seeing brands that you've never heard of before, we want to show up on the same placement where people are used to seeing Apple or a high fashion brand, right? And then all of a sudden public comes and you're like, oh, I've been seeing these blue chip companies here, even if the context is a little bit different, and it starts to become that proxy. So absolutely. We were talking a little bit about acquisition and how sometimes over time we've kind of turned that dial up on brand. One of the things that has happened is as we've continued to go up market is that the consideration time gets longer and longer, right? People are not going to convert to public, or typically not going to convert to public just because they see one paid Instagram ad, right? You have that more traditional media mix that we need to hit people at different points in the funnel. Each one of those needs to work together to build that trust. And so that's one of the things that we look at all the time is how do we build trust all the way down the funnel? And so our media mix is constantly changing, right? Due to a variety of reasons, but you will see public doing some more of that traditional marketing. Like we are on podcast ads. Again, the context in which you hear public. We want people to hear public on their way to work on a podcast that they trust. And then when they get to the office and they put some markets news on in the background, we want them to see one of our very high quality TV ads that they've seen. And then once they're into the fold, we're going to hit them on digital with a message that can go a little bit wider or more variety of creative because we have more targeting capabilities, but it's still going to be all about executing on trust at different points. In terms of what are things that we have gone away from, I would say not that we used to do it, but one thing that we're always careful about is incentives and being careful to use those in the right instances and use them to promote the right behaviors. If we're offering a match on IRA contributions, that is arguably one of the most serious products out there, right? These are people that are saving for their retirement. We can bring them into the fold. It's a super sticky product. I think that's a very appropriate way to have a match. But the way that we're going to talk about it is going to be pretty serious, pretty sophisticated. But beyond that, we'll be very careful with the way that we use incentives. Because again, if you use too many incentives, it's not very public. You said it, not me, right? We'll be careful with the way that we use those. So that's one thing that we've been thinking about. And then just generally, with trust, you and I have talked a lot about this, but again, it's paramount with every single thing that we do. Like, we are asking people to trust public with their life savings. And again, as we move up market, like, not only are we asking people to trust us, but sometimes there's people that already have brokerages. They are with a brokerage that they already have some degree of trust in. We want them to move over to public. We're in a switching game at this point. Or maybe they have a point and we want them to come and try out public. That trust has to be there at every stage. And so that is the thing that we're looking through at every point, from a product to a marketing to brand perspective, et cetera.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I want to talk about AI, but before that, I wanted to ask, like, you as a company and also as a marketing team have to be so in touch with Gen Z, who are going to be eventually the generation with the most amount of money. How do you find that this generation trusts, their signals are different? What does credibility look like to Gen Z? Or maybe do you measure it in a different way? What do you find is a little bit different about this generation that you have to be very aware of? Because obviously these are one of your core audiences.
Yeah, one of the things that we try to do at the end of the day is, right, like, if public is built for people who take investing seriously, we want to, as much as possible, seek those people out and speak directly to them. And as you said, that there can be people that are serious about investing, that have the intent to be serious. Even if they're more novice, even if they're younger, they can still be serious. And so we want to seek those people out. And we want to stand up and say, like, we are for you. And we want to send a bunch of signals that the people, and when we're talking Gen Z, those people are usually a little bit more nascent, right, in their investing journey just by virtue of their ages. But we still want them to see themselves in public. We show up on a variety of different platforms. TikTok is still a good example of a platform that we show up in that skews a little bit younger. There are pieces of creative that we will develop that can work both on TV and in TikTok. But then there are times where we're developing creative that is more TikTok or vertical scroll, thumb stopping focused, right? And we will continue to do that over time. One of the other things that we see is, especially younger audiences, but not exclusively, are very much online. One of the things that we're trying to do and put a big focus on is, how can public show up on the internet in a way that is authentic? And so a couple of good examples. Steven Sykes, our COO, is very active in Reddit, in the subreddits. It's been pretty incredible to see the community on Reddit, which, again, not just Gen Z, but that it skews up or varies up and down. But you see folks on these subreddits start to police or help and encourage each other. You will see people say, hey, you have a question? Steven, the CEO, he's always in these subreddits. Watch out for him. And you start to see this interaction and these conversations that play out in real time. And these, even though they are maybe small in the people that are actually engaging in the comments, but it goes from there, because there's a lot of people that go on to Reddit that don't actually comment, but they're reading. And then that person talks to somebody else like, oh, you can actually talk to somebody from public. That's pretty cool. They're coming on here and answering my questions directly. And so Reddit is one example, but we have folks on our team that are very active across platforms, especially digital social platforms, to try to show that there are people here at Public that are available. We're listening. We want to engage directly with you in an authentic way. It's not going to ever be authentic by saying we're authentic. You have to actually do it. And we're starting to see that really bear some fruit right now.
Yeah, I love that. So what I'm hearing is, like, what Gen Z really care about is they will take a company seriously that is very active online. I don't think a Gen Z would seek out a company if they're like, there's nothing online. They would find that, like, no, I don't trust them. And also what you're saying is like access to experts. So if they can, because I don't think that's true for maybe someone who's older, right? Like, who didn't grow up with the internet. They maybe care more about a physical perspective or something like that. Whereas a Gen Z would be more like, I want to be able to talk to the people I'm giving my money to, and I want to be able to see them on social, on TikTok, on Reddit, and I want to be able to see, and I want good quality as well. But it still has to be authentic. So it's that kind of weird like balance. So it's like, these are the things you need to keep in mind if you're a B2C fintech focusing on this generation. You need to be good at these things.
Yeah, and one of the areas that I find fascinating is, and again, I think it ties directly into this idea of authenticity that I see really speaks well with, or resonates with, younger audiences as they've grown up in this completely digital age, where as opposed to, a more millennial audience where we started less digital and has evolved over time. but there's just been this deluge of content and digital advertising out for them. And so they've have spent their entire lives already picking out what's real, what's not, and how to identify that. And so I think that authenticity is really key there. Now, what's really interesting in the marketing space is this idea of UGC advertising, right? And creating ads that feel like content that don't feel like ads. But at some point, is there just so much shit out there that it's all just fake UGC content? And then at what point, and to your point about slop, you can't go on Twitter without reading about how some company has created a system to have 10 versions of a AI avatar create 10 versions of a different product hook, right? It's like, what is real, what is not real? And so the opportunities where we can show up in a real and authentic space, I think have potential to really have outsized returns. And so again, like if we're still relatively small in terms of numbers of our team, but we want to throw our time, resources, throw our weight against things that have those outsized returns and where we can show up authentically. And whether that's a TV ad, which is obviously different from somebody like Steven going on and talking, we want it to represent our brand and our product in a very authentic way.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a good segue to talk about AI because I think you're doing really interesting things, not just in the both the product and the marketing space. And I think there's two questions I have here. Like, first of all, tell us a bit about the new launch that you had recently on generated assets, but also just on that topic of like, how do you as an organization use AI in your marketing in a way that doesn't cheapen the brand, that is not super risky because people will be like, is this even real? And actually does make you more efficient, but in a way that still is continuing to build that like trust and your messaging in general?
Sure. You tell me, where do you want to start? Do you want me to start on the product side or the marketing? Because like, while of course they're tied, they are quite different. I think they're two kind of conversations.
That's true. I think let's set the scene with the product because it's quite an interesting, I think it's innovative and there's a lot of interesting things there. And then we can tie it into marketing maybe.
Absolutely. I think that's great. One of the cool things about Public is that we were very early in integrating AI directly into our product. So as early 2023, we launched our first AI product called Alpha, which is a research assistant that was built directly into the product, right? Like this idea of being on any stock page, you swipe down, you could have a natural language conversation. What we've seen over time is a lot of companies and across sectors have added some sort of LLM chatbot. But what we've done is gone from there and gone into how do we build an AI intelligence layer directly into the product, right? So you're getting proactive news, information, insights, alerts that are specific and tailored to your portfolio before you ever know that you even need them, right? And so the product has evolved over time. And I think we're doing a really good job leading the charge at building this AI native platform. What you're referring to in terms of our most recent launch is back in November of this past year, we put out kind of our AI keynote, our sort of thesis on AI at this point, and kind of broke out our world of AI into three sort of spaces, which is this idea of like research, kind of what we launched first, this idea of creation, which is generated assets. I'll come back to this, and this idea of action agents, which we'll talk about as well. With generated assets, we launched a product. There are ETFs for many different sectors out there, and ETFs have been great products for people, but we had this idea, right, that other people or you might have an idea of an index or a financial instrument that you could create. So this idea that you can create an investable index out of any idea that you might have, right? And so like, I think early on in the time that we were developing this generated assets product, there was a viral Twitter post where somebody was saying, oh, I wish I could make an ETF based on CEOs who could bench press over 200 pounds, because that would show that the CEOs, right, exercise their discipline, thus they show more discipline in their jobs, right? And they created that, that went viral. With this product, you can do that sort of thematic thing. You can also go a lot deeper, and you are working with our AI LLM, right, to create those criteria in which to create the actual index that you're creating. And it does it in seconds, right? Which is, there are entire firms out there that create ETFs over time, and you can use our AI tool to build that nearly instantly. It's really incredible. Encourage you to play around with it. It's a lot of fun. We actually just on Tuesday launched a pretty big update, which is called the Discovery Hub. So you can actually see the thousands of different generated assets that have been created. They're immediately back tested, right? You can see how they would have performed against the S&P, which is super cool. You can go in, you can edit them. If you have your own idea, you can make that, you can share it with friends and go from there. Really cool. So even more developments to come on that front. And then we previewed the idea of agents, this idea of action, taking action through agents, where it sort of shifts from placing an order on your laptop or your mobile device for a certain stock to starting to express intent, and you can work with an AI agent to execute prompts on your behalf. We have a lot more to come out with that in the near future, but we previewed it in that keynote from late November, and we're really excited to get this one live. So a lot more to come there. That's the preview on that.
Yeah, that's crazy. You've been busy. Yeah.
Sure have.
It hasn't been a calm time. And also, I mean, this is kind of a segue to the marketing question, which is, as you've got all these product launches going, how is the marketing team kind of working with the product team on that? Are you part of do you help shape the product narrative beforehand and then translate it after? Like, where do you step in to help with those launches?
It's a great question. Generally from inception. Now, the product team, right, is really leading the charge when it comes to product roadmap, but the management team is obviously involved. We have a very lean team, and we work incredibly collaboratively and incredibly iteratively at the org. And there's not a lot of red tape. And so it's very easy for me to go directly to our head of product, our Yannick, our other co-founder, co-CEO who leads up product, right? Like his office is mere feet away from me and I have access to him. And that's just kind of indicative of the way in which our teams operate. Jake, who leads up our acquisition team, lifecycle sits under him, lifecycle directly tied to product. They're working hand in hand every day. And you see that really come to life in the way that these things roll out. There are different times where something might be a little bit further along from a product standpoint before brand comes in, but generally there's very little that is precious, and we often jump in pretty early. One of the interesting things about having a co-founder, co-CEO sort of setup is that if Life is a little bit more leading the charge on all things marketing and Yannick is leading the charge on all things product, they are working together hand in hand at all times, and it facilitates this nice little feedback loop at all times. And so again, like I just kind of long-winded way to say that, yes, we're very involved. It varies product by product, launch by launch, right? There are some that are smaller updates and we're trying to get those out as quickly as possible. And we might be making some product or some copy adjustments to make sure that they align. Now, something like our upcoming agentic launch, or with this launch of agents that we've been previewing, this is deep marketing, and marketing and product is working hand in hand in the way that we are naming the product, the way that we're talking about the product within the product, and how does that align with everything that we're doing externally. So again, it varies by timing and size of the project.
Yeah, there's no time to rest. It just keeps going. And well, so this ties into then within the marketing org. How are you finding ways to use AI to maybe keep up with that? I imagine that you need a bit of that, but also just in general, as we discussed earlier, like to ensure that the content you're creating, because you're producing so much content across the podcast, the website, everything, newsletter. How do you create those workflows with AI while ensuring that it's like high quality, keeps that trust, all of that?
I think one of the really cool things with AI as part of our marketing stack is that for a while we kind of thought about AI as sort of a force multiplier when it comes to time, resources, and if we need to get some SEM search terms, can I do that via ChatGPT? Absolutely. And so how can we use it as a force multiplier? But with all of the developments, and like I'm deep in like design, AI, fintech, Twitter, like that's what is in my feed every day. And like, I mean, there are memes about all of the AI design tools and vibe coding tools, and like it's impossible for anyone to keep up right now. But if we kind of strip some of those things away from a principle standpoint, what we've been really trying to think about is AI not just as a force multiplier, but as a creative multiplier. And how can AI allow us to do things that we might not have otherwise been able to do? We released a ad that's running on TV right now. Internally, we're calling it voicemail. And it's literally a father leaving a voicemail to his daughter, who daughter moves to a new city, new job. And at the end of the day, they are talking about our IRA product. We built every aspect of this TV ad using AI. So it is a sort of mixed media of still images as well as video. And one of the unlocks that we had was this idea of creating character consistency. And if you're deep into this AI Twitter like I am, this character consistency was a big unlock for a lot of people. But what we were able to do is create an ad with one character where she stays consistent throughout the course of the ad, call it 20 different still photography clips, 10 different video clips, and that character stays consistent, which allows us to create something that feels real. Then there's a lot of little pieces that we brought to it that were test and learn in terms of how do we make this feel lived in, authentic, real, that tips and tricks that we learned. And now the interesting thing, right, is that at the end of the day, it allowed us to create this concept where if we would have produced this traditionally, we would have had to hire a production company, go out and shoot something, or rely just on stock photographs. Searching through stock photographs is no joke, right? That takes time and effort. But we were actually able to, through some really smart prompting and trial and error, right, get to a place where we had this incredible output. Now, the human piece is still absolutely critical, right? You need the idea at the start. You're not just prompting something and spitting out a TV ad, right? We're building this step by step. It's a puzzle that we have to put together. We have to test and learn, train the models on different elements, put it all together. And then when it comes out, there's still a human piece of the video editing, right? In this instance, the video editing to tell that story. So it's taking these elements that were created via prompt by AI and putting together in a narrative that makes sense and bringing them to life. So there's still a human aspect. Now, the music was created by AI, the sound effects AI, the voiceover by AI, but there's still a human that kind of brings it all together. Really exciting. We have a lot more of that to come. We have another TV spot that is going to go live in the coming days that is all AI generated. And again, back to the context that we spoke about at the beginning, we would never use AI to fake a founder talking about public as a testimonial. But for something that is creative and does not matter if it was done by AI, we will take that. And if it can help us better communicate an idea or help us even further an idea, we are all for it.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I think I don't know if I saw that ad. I saw another, and I don't know if that one was generated by AI, but I'm going to watch that one that you mentioned because I'm curious to see if I can tell. How much do you think it saved you, maybe in hours or just a multiple of whatever? Like, what do you think it saved you?
Hey, look, you can find production companies at various levels to go out and shoot something for you. So on the low end, it could have been $100,000. It could have been more. And the interesting thing is I shared it with a lot of people, and I used to work in ad agencies and still have a lot of love for ad agencies, but things are changing. And a lot of people were very impressed with the ad and kind of like oh wow, yeah, like things are changing. But it also, even if we were to have created that entirely internally, it would have been at least 2 to 3 days of shooting and prep of that work, multiple people. And instead we could kind of do the entire thing with 3 people. It still took hours, days, even. Like realistically, it took probably 2.5 weeks kind of end to end, not working on it 100%, but because of the way that is structured, you're able to also work on other things. Where in a traditional production, you're kind of like, okay, idea, script, pre-planning, pre-production, and you have 1 or 2 people that are all in on pre-production, and then production, like you got to go actually film the thing. And now it's allowing us to kind of condense that process, move even quicker, and in this instance, actually help bolster the creative idea. Whereas if we wanted to do this before, we would have been confined to what we could find via stock photography. Instead, we could create something that better fit the idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also, this is just the beginning, right? I imagine each new ad you create will take less and less time as you tweak and improve the processes. So, wow, that's amazing. I love that. So I want to end on one last question because this has been really interesting. You and your team are very in touch with how your target audience thinks, especially now that you're targeting more serious investors. What is your favorite way to stay in touch with how those serious investors think and feel, worry, all those things? You mentioned Twitter a few times, so I wonder if that's your...
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Like, one of the things that we've always talked about is like, how are we the company that has the most direct line to our customers? And that happens in a variety of different ways, and some more than my team than others. But like, our product team takes very regular calls with users and prospective users to get feedback on the product. People shake bugs into the app and we look into them. People respond on Reddit. Like I said, Steven, our COO, is deep into Reddit, giving almost CX level support at times. And he'll escalate things and he'll take things offline, of course. But we see that. And then that beyond that, we see that on Twitter. We like to get out there. One of the things that we have also done is put a big focus on creating like real organic relationships with influential people. And I say that specifically influential people, not just influencers, but people that are a little bit more influential among their group. So maybe smaller audience sizes or more longer tail, but how do we create organic relationships with them? And that's really like a hand-to-hand, man-to-man, or woman-to-woman, right? In this instance, Julia on my team leads up to this idea, and she is on calls every day. She's taking people out to coffee. She's meeting people IRL, whether it's in real life at a coffee shop or a lunch, or we're hosting a dinner, or it's over Zoom, but she's actually meeting people, and that extends into the broader team. We host roughly once a month or once every month, we're hosting a dinner to bring new creators or creator-like folks into the fold and meet them. There's no ask, right? We're not doing deep demos at these dinners. We are bringing people in to get to know them, hear what they think, speak to them on their terms and in their words, and find out what they need, what they want, how they see the landscape. And it directly impacts how we market the product as well as the features and tools that are being built within the product.
Nice. Amazing. Well, this has been fascinating. Thanks so much, Zach, for your time. I think it's really refreshing to see a company that's doing real kind of AI innovation, not just slapping AI and saying, yeah, we've got a chatbot.
Love to hear it.
I think the generated asset it's really cool. I can't wait to test it out. So thanks so much for jumping on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And being on the lookout in the next couple of weeks, we have a few big announcements we're very excited about.
Excited to see it. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks for listening. You can find show notes and information about guests at www.mintcopywritingstudios.com/podcast. And finally, huge thanks to orama.tv for producing this podcast. Thanks for listening and see you at the next episode.